In this video, I'm going to give you 6 snappy techniques for keeping your feet warm while you're adventuring in cold conditions. My name is Aaron Linsdale. I'm a polar explorer and professional adventurer. I've frozen my feet a lot, and I'm here to give you some ideas on how to keep your tootsies warm so you don't suffer the same way I have. Tip number 1 is to make sure that whatever socks you're using in the day are not what you put in your sleeping bag at night. This is really key because you need to get these socks that you've worn on the day, besides the fact they probably don't smell good, and they're going to be moist. You do not want to go to bed with moist socks. Instead, you want to get fresh socks, or at least the freshest you can, that are dried and ideally dedicated to sleeping. Get your feet in those toasty warm socks. Put your day socks into your sleeping bag to get them to dry, and it will make all the difference in keeping your feet warm while you're camping in the outdoors. The corollary to that, tip number 2, is make sure not to go to your bed with your feet wet. If your feet got wet for any number of reasons, sweating too much, hiking, getting in water, whatever the case might be, if your feet are moist and you put them in a sleeping bag, you're going to get the sleeping bag wet, and you really don't want to do that. So even if it's really cold and you're like, man, my feet are soaking wet and I don't want to put them in a sleeping bag, get your sweater dry off your feet. Do everything to get in between your toes and dry that foot out. Now, it may not be comfortable. You may need to just rub your feet as vigorously as you can, but you want to make sure your feet are as dry as possible before you put them into your down booties and putting it into your sleeping bag, because that can make all the difference in keeping your feet warm. Now, the third tip is to, and I'm going to get burned by this, is to not use a bivy sack with a down bag if you can avoid it. Because bivy sacks are super great, they're ultra small, super light, and they can keep you warm if they have a reflective coating inside. The problem is once you jam that sleeping bag in there, to sleep in there, that bivy sack can actually cause your feet to get incredibly moist, including your body, get the down soaked, and you'll have a miserable night of sleep. Now, some people swear by bivy sacks, but if you don't have a way to manage the moisture buildup inside, I promise that you will end up with cold feet, because the moisture in here will moisten your feet, it will moisten the sleeping bag, and it will give you a miserable night's sleep. So if you're going to use a bivy sack, make sure this system works for you and you've got a way to deal with the moisture on your feet. Before I go into tip number 4, at the end of the video, please like and comment on it. And if you found it useful, subscribe to the channel. I've got 15 videos in the link playlist below on different tips on how to keep your feet warm in the outdoors in the cold. And also, I have a book on how to keep your feet warm in the cold. It's got all these tips and even more in there in a nice book format for you. So tip number 4 is kind of interesting in that when your bag is moist or it gets covered in frost, don't just use your hand to push the moisture or the frost off, because what will happen with your hand is it's got a little bit of warmth, or maybe a lot of warmth, and as you try and brush that frost off, you're actually going to warm the frost up, change it to water, push it into the fabric, and drive it into the down. So you don't want to do that, because that will cause the down to pick up water and it will make your feet colder. Instead, use your boot brush, which has no heat and is at the frost temperature, to just quickly brush that frost off, and it makes a big difference. If you don't happen to have a boot brush, which is another suggestion in another video, is use your jacket, use your sweater, whatever it takes, something that's cold, to brush off the frost off your sleeping bag. That way you don't end up driving water into your sleeping bag to make your feet colder. The next tip, tip number 5, is to avoid hammocks, because with a hammock, when you're hanging several feet off the ground, plenty of air moves back and forth under you, and it can make your feet incredibly cold because convection or airflow can make all the difference in keeping your body warm or cold. If there's airflow around your body and you're in the hammock, you're going to have an extra heavy sleeping bag, an extra pad, and all sorts of stuff to keep you warm. Now, some hammock users will swear by their system, but note you have to take extreme measures, make sure you're in a completely protected space, because if there's breeze around you, I promise you, your feet are going to get cold. Now, the sixth technique is to decide where to choose your camp, and you do not want to sleep in the bottom of a valley if you can avoid it. Why is that? The sixth technique is all about where to place your camp and your tent, is because cold air falls down from the mountains, falls or migrates down into the bottom of valleys, and it actually makes a cold area in the valleys. Now, sometimes you don't have a choice. It's just not possible to get a little bit out of the valley, and that's just the way it is. But know that if you can avoid it, climb even 100 yards or just like 90 meters outside the bottom of a valley, up a hill, and you can recover several degrees of temperature in your campsite just by doing that. Just the geography and how the physics works of cold air masses moving, it all collects in the bottom of the valley and it will make you cold. So that's tip number 6. Don't camp in the bottom of a valley. It can make all the difference in keeping your feet warm. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe out there. Check my book out on how to keep your feet warm in the cold. Enjoy your adventures with warm feet.